I'm in too deep. There is no coming back from this. There is no need to ever do piano black, and yet every automaker does. Hello, my name is Alanis King, and I'm wearing 2 jackets because it's freezing out here. But that's okay, because this right here is a 2022 Porsche 911 GT3 Touring. This car has 502 horsepower, a 6-speed manual transmission, and a screaming 9,000 RPM redline. I have been dreaming of a 911 GT3 for years, albeit a purple one, and I cannot wait to drive this car today. But first, I should tell you, this 911 GT3 Touring is now available on Cars and Bids. If you want to check out more photos, see the full spec list, or maybe even bid on it, you can check out the link in the description of this video. Before we get to this car, I want to talk about a moment I had recently. For the past few years, I have spec'd a manual viola purple metallic 911 GT3 with a big wing, maybe once a month. I'm not buying it right now, but how cool would it be to buy it eventually, right? I know you can relate. The other week, I drove a Roof RT12, which is a highly customized 911 adjacent supercar that has a 997 style body and a 996 turbo engine that is mega powerful. If you're not super familiar with 911s and you want to know what all those numbers mean, 996, 997, 992, 991, 991.2, just Google Porsche 911 generations and you'll figure it out eventually, I promise. But back to my Roof RT12 story. The other week, I was at the place selling the car, which is a showroom called HCC Specialty Cars in Dallas. And on the floor, they have a bunch of Porsches. So we got done filming and we were all standing outside talking about Porsches. And I found myself talking about special 911 options and paint to sample colors like Moon Gym, which is this beautiful light lavender color. And I had this horrifying revelation that I am a Porsche 911 guy. And you might be thinking, Alanis, that's not a bad thing. You're passionate about a car. What's wrong with that? What's wrong is that I have spent so many hours of my life in the Porsche 911 configurator that I can name all of the special options and the generation codes and the paint to sample choices, everything. And to a normal person, this is a mind-numbing conversation. It is so boring that they want to run away and never see me again. And yet to me, it's the most exciting thing in the world. I'm in too deep. There is no coming back from this. That's how I figured out that I am a Porsche 911 guy. And you probably are too, whether or not you've realized or accepted it yet. But now it's time to get to my favorite topic, which is the Porsche 911. Why am I such a 911 person? It's a great question. It's because the 911 is one of the most perfect sports cars you can buy. It's so good. And that's actually a disservice to the 911 in some ways because so many people buy them that the 911 actually becomes kind of common for what it is. And it leads people to believe that it's the easy choice. It's the basic choice and they would rather be different. But it's the easy choice because it's so good. I always say that you say you're not a 911 person if you haven't driven a 911 yet. And once you drive a 911, you get it. It just is. It's a 911. It's so good. And this one has the added bonus of being a higher trim like the GT3. There are also so many different 911s to choose from. If I go on the Porsche website right now in 2024, there are 25 different 911 models and then endless customizations. Once you start working on those 911 models, you can do whatever you want. The cheapest one is a $116,000 911 Carrera, and we can climb all the way up to the 911 ST, which starts at $291,000. There's also the 911 Dakar, which is a rally 911 that starts at $223,000. But today, let's focus on the GT3 range, which is what this car is from. The first 911 GT3 debuted in 1999 during the 996 generation of the car. And this was a big time for Porsche because they had just switched the 911 from air-cooled to water-cooled. That is a move that 25 years later people still get fired up about. Porsche said the GT3 was the intersection between production and racing cars, and it was based on the 911 GT3 Cup car. That early 911 GT3 wasn't street legal in America because its bumpers were too low, but it was fast. I talked about this bit of history in another video on the Cars and Bids channel about the 911 GT3 RS. But in 1999, Porsche sent German rally champion Walter Rohl to the Nurburgring Nordschleife, which is the roughly 13-mile German track where automakers go to battle it out to see who is the fastest. In the session, Porsche claimed that the 996 911 GT3 was the first road legal production car to set a lap time of less than 8 minutes. In automotive talk, that's a big deal. The GT3 became a fixture of the 911 lineup, and it's near the top of that lineup. You can currently buy 3 versions of the GT3. The regular one, the GT3 Touring, and the GT3 RS. The GT3 RS is the mean and scary one. The GT3 is slightly less mean and scary, but still has a giant wing on the back. And the GT3 Touring is the classy one with no wing. I find that people I talk to are partial to the GT3 Touring because it's less out there. It has these classy, beautiful 911 lines back here without a big wing interrupting them. But I personally am very gaudy, and I love the wing. That's just me though. The GT3 Touring does have a wing, and basically, when you don't need it, it's down like this. And when you do, it just pops up back there. That brings us to this car, the 2022 Porsche 911 GT3 Touring. This car has a sticker of $212,000 compared to its $160,000 base price. And you might say, Alanis, that's $50,000 in options. But to that I say, have you ever spec'd a 911 GT3 on the Porsche website? Because I struggled to keep it anywhere near 200. Probably because I always do the $15,000 paint to sample options, which are so much money. This car has a 4-liter naturally aspirated Boxer 6 in the rear, not up here, and it makes 502 horsepower and 346 pound-feet of torque. All that goes to the rear wheels through a 6-speed manual transmission. And if you're one of those people who screams, bright colors belong on cars, I get it, so am I. But I'm actually kind of partial to this color. It's called Chalk, and it's a $4,000 option on this car. And I got a press car in Chalk one time, and my husband and I still talk about how much we liked it. We are now at my favorite part of every single episode, which is, can Alanis fit in the trunk frunk cargo space? These shoes are too dirty to be getting in there. And there is no way those shoes are getting inside this car. Listen, my hips can go down, but I don't know if they can come back up. I don't know if I'm flexible enough to be like closed in, but I can sit. Welcome inside the GT3 Touring. And the first thing I always tell people about the inside of a 911 is how much space there is. It's so nice in here. You have so much headroom, you have so much legroom, you have so much arm room. Tall people who like sports cars and maybe have trouble fitting in some sports cars, there's room. The interior of this car really mirrors the exterior. It's that classy, understated aura. It's all black in here. We have the red deviated stitching, the red on the gauges, and my favorite, I love the yellow on the shifter. Oh, it's so good. The features in here are just so nice, but you also have to kind of look for them, like the Porsche logos that are just pressed into the leather. Oh, I love it. The materials also just flow so well together. You have the suede headliner, this textured leather material on the dashboard. You have, oh my goodness, this car is just so good. You have the cloth centers on these seats. It's just so classy and so understated. It doesn't scream, I'm a Porsche 911. It's just like, hey, I'm a Porsche 911 GT3 Touring, and I am so cool. Another thing I love when you start going up the price ladder of cars is how all of the switches feel. When you click these switches in a 911, and it just has that feedback. Oh my goodness, it bounces back toward your finger in the opposite direction that you pushed it. It's such a nice quality. I absolutely love it. Now, the one thing I do have a problem with in this interior is the piano black around the shifter. There is no need to ever do piano black, and yet every automaker does. And it's so beautiful right now, and it's so clean. But you spend a little bit of time in here and you're just gonna get dust and grease all over it. It looks beautiful right now though. The 911's dashboard is also just very neutrally facing. A lot of sports cars have the dashboard and the interior just kind of cresting toward the driver, so the passenger feels completely left out. But me in the passenger seat right now, I have perfect access to the infotainment screen, all the controls, and I can see all of the gauges that the driver sees. And I think it's really interesting in this car that there's digital all over the dashboard. The infotainment screen is digital, and there are multiple digital gauges. But the one gauge that is fixed and not digital is that tachometer. Because you know what you're gonna do? You're gonna rev it to 9,000 in here. The only thing that's not super passenger friendly is you get one cup holder, but it's also not super driver friendly, because any cup holders that are placed right here in a manual car, you're just gonna hit the cup holder or the drink with your arm. So it's not an ideal cup holder in any situation, for driver or passenger. Now this back seat area is really just a storage area. So I'm not gonna be able to get back here. But I do wanna say that there is a lot of storage back here. You could fit at least a couple of carry-ons back here, maybe 3. 1 on that back ledge and 2 in these little seat bucket things. You could go to the airport in this easily. Just don't bring a third person. It's time to drive the 911 GT3 Touring. But first, I need to tell y'all, ground rules. This car is not past its break-in period. It quite literally on the screen in front of me says not at break-in period yet. It's about 200 miles away from its break-in period. So no, we are not going to go wild in this car. I'm just going to describe to you how it feels to drive it. Sometimes that's the reality of driving very low mileage cars. You have to take care of it for the next person who's going to buy it. So we are going to drive it, and I'm so excited to drive a GT3 Touring. And if you want to see a GT3 RS screech to redline, please check out the video on the Cars and Bids channel. There's a video on my channel about a GT3 RS. It's lizard green. Go click that. You can watch that thing scream. This one is not gonna do that today, but I highly recommend you go there. One thing I always forget about 911s when you're driving them is just how like visceral it feels, even at low speeds. They're just so like jumpy and angry. And another thing that's really interesting about this car is that I have only driven 911s in PDK. So I'm not used to the manual 911. As I'm driving this car, the clutch pedal is so far to the right that it's actually kind of surprising. When I'm putting my foot down, I actually go more toward the left looking for the clutch pedal because I'm expecting it to be further this way, and it's more to the right than you would think. Oh, it just sounds so nice. I know we can't go crazy, but it sounds so nice. And it's also a very stiff ride. Like even for a touring, I'm going over rough roads and it is stiff. And I think the thing that's really interesting when you get in a 911 is that not only is it stiff, but also you hear those little noises, those little like gravel noises on the side of the car. It's a lot. It reminds you of the weight of driving a car and how much of a car this is. You can just feel it when you rev. You can just feel it wanting to go. And I reminisce on the GT3 RS, which has that just wild 9,000 RPM acceleration, and you're just, oh, you want to go, but you can't. Not in a car that hasn't been broken in yet. You can't go. I think the thing that's very interesting about this car is I would describe it as very springy, the 911. So the pedals are springy. When you shift into another gear, it's springy. When it's reminding you that you're lurching a little bit, it's springy. There's weight to it. It's like a cat toy, like a spring cat toy, just ready to pounce at any given time. Oh, and it just feels so planted and so ready to jump. That's just how all 911s feel. They feel planted, they feel ready to jump, they feel ready to go. The clutch feel is really, really nice. It's springy, you press it down and it feels like you did something. You know when you press a clutch pedal that's light and airy and it's fine, but also it doesn't quite feel like you did something monumental. When you press the 911's clutch, it feels like you did something monumental. You have that little area of pressure before the clutch pedal continues going down and you're like, ugh, that meant something. I think I would get used to this stiff ride after a while. I think I would get used to it pretty quickly, but it's still surprising in how stiff it is at first. The shifter feel, it's not a heavy shifter, but it's a shifter that feels consequential when you shift it. It has this tiny little notch to it that just like clunk, 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 clunk. It's so rewarding. The feeling of all of the controls in here is just so rewarding. And it would be so rewarding if we could just send this thing straight to 9,000 RPM, but we can't. Another thing that's interesting is I don't think I've driven a lot of manuals or any that I can like recall off the top of my head with auto start stop on them. So when you're at a stoplight, and not a stop, below a stoplight or a stop sign, and your foot is on the brake, the auto start stop feature will go and you'll just have your foot on the brake, and if it's not on the clutch, the engine will stop. And then as soon as you put your foot back in the clutch, the engine will go, like the engine will kick on again. And it's such an interesting feature when you pair modern technology with an old school way of driving. It's such an interesting thing. One of these days I'm gonna drive a GT3 or whatever kind of GT3 that's not in its break-in period, and we're gonna go wild. But not today. Today we had to be calm, and that's okay because it's a GT3 Touring and we went on a tour. So that was the 2022 Porsche 911 GT3 Touring. I always say this, but every Porsche 911 is a reminder of why the 911 is the easy choice. This car is so good. And I'm glad I could show you that today, both for your sake and my own. And if you want to learn more about this GT3, maybe check out more photos, see the full spec list, or even bid on it, you can check out the cars and bid listing at the link in the description of this video. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.